Welcome to Citizens for Community Media. We're here in South Bend, Indiana. Gus Zuehlke and myself, Peter Helland. 18 years ago, we did a show together. We did a lot of shows together. One we did was on Vince Lombardi. And we want to revisit that because we want to look at that discussion from maybe some fresh angles. Some people said that that was our best show, okay? Public access days, hardly anybody ever wrote a letter, and the only time you knew anybody even saw your show would be if you met somebody at a grocery store or something. You didn't get too much feedback, but in hindsight, you discovered that a lot of people were watching locally.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. In those days, I used to go to the bank, and the tellers would talk to me about our discussions on the Civil War. And at one point, I said to them, "It's really getting tiring for me, because I've been discussing the Civil War with Peter for about 2 years." And the head teller at that bank said, "Gus, it took 4 years to fight the Civil War." And she smiled. Hang in there, you know.
Right, but they liked it. Okay.
They liked it. And a lot of people, particularly, dealt with our differences creatively. I thought they learned something by our debates. And the debates were fierce at times, as I remember.
Well, let's revisit that debate. Here's the scripture I like. Proverbs 26:18. As a madman who casts firebrands, arrows, and death, so is the man that deceives his neighbor and says, "Am not I in sport?" Okay, so the word sport, we grew up in that word sport without questioning it, just like we grew up with TV right at the very beginning. I'm born in 1952, so we grew up with that's all we knew. But history did not know of the TV, and sport as we know it was not known, except you go way back to the gladiator, to the spectacles, which Tertullian's the father of the Latin Church and the Western Church, and he wrote a famous article, little small book called The Spectacles, and they were mainly the gladiator events, the chariot races, the theater, and another one. But he said the sign that you were a Christian was that you did not go to those spectacles. That was the main witness to the world, that the world never expected a Christian could be there. Okay, so that's the challenge to this culture. And 18 years ago, we're looking at Lombardi and sports. Now we've seen where sports has gone in 18 years, okay? And we're going to reflect on the trajectory that this is taking us. And is it taking us right where Tertullian would say no Christian can participate in the frenzy? I mean, he had several reasons why Christians couldn't go. So this question always has to be there. You have to be watching and praying. But like you were saying, my history with sports, because you wanted me to give a brief, okay. Sports is entered into by children first, right?
Right.
Okay.
It's play.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Right. And girls play dolls, and then they move past that. And boys do all kinds of stuff. Okay.
And usually play team sports with,
Well, once it's organized, I don't consider it a sport per se. Okay, so I don't consider Little League. I don't consider Little League per se a sport, because sport we went through this 18 years ago, but it's from a Dutch word, boerte, means to jest. Okay, sport is freedom and play. Once you have Little League, there's no freedom, and the play nowadays is a joke. Okay, it's serious business. It's the opposite of a sport.
Wow. Well, there is a change there, because there was a relishing of even the organized play that we went through, in the 70s in our teams.
Well, let's put it this way. Okay.
I mean, at least I experienced that.
Let me put it this way. So
I
grew up in the Dells, right?
Okay.
And it just so happened the people I ended up playing right next to me was a big sport family. Okay, one ended up playing for the Eagles, and another family, the uncle played for the Milwaukee Braves. Okay, so we had high power consciousness of sports. Okay, but we organized our own ourselves. We got up and we had a free time, and their dad died young. Okay, a bunch of brothers. So we organized our own games all the time. Not one adult took the slightest interest, except every once in a while some older guys would come by and just
watch,
throw the baseball, and they could throw so fast you could make your head spin because you're only like 10 years old, right? But we organized our own games, and that's what we chose to do. We chose to do it. That's what sport is supposed to be. It's your free time. What do you want to do? Nobody's telling you what to do. This is what you chose. This is what we chose. Nobody was telling us what to do. Once the parents enter in, it's a whole different thing. Okay? Now it's business. Now this is what's important. Okay? Now, what should parents be doing? This is where I think it goes back to. Okay? Should parents be pushing kids into sport? Is that the best option they have? Okay? Because parents are obligated to, the father especially, he's commanded to rule over his home, raising his children in the instruction and admonition of the Lord, and having his children in subjection with all gravity. Gravity is the opposite of foolishness. And foolishness and jesting go together. Okay? So sports is the opposite of gravity. Okay? And when we played sports, we jested like crazy. Okay? We had as much fun as possible. Even high school football. During practice, we jested. Okay? We were having fun. Now, we did want to win.
Right.
And we look back, and I talk to my friends. We still go over games, And I visit my one friend that we grew up with, then he moved to the next town. And I ended up tackling him one time. And he still says, had I known it was you, you wouldn't have got me. I say, so we keep reliving these things like we're reliving the Battle of Gettysburg, okay? Which is
that's recounted in Bruce Springsteen's song, Glory Days, where he talks about that people just keep reliving what they consider to be the glory days of their high school time, and Springsteen, who is really it was said about him, it has been said about him, he has a Catholic imagination, because the point of the song is that the glory days pass you by, and it's the wink of a young girl's eye. Like that. And so there's a kind of fleeting character to the play. The play doesn't last. But is it worthwhile? That's the question. Right?
No. I'd have to assume it. You have to assume by looking at history and Christian history, I just don't see them giving much play to play. Okay? I don't see them raising their children, or you take, like Theodore Roosevelt said, the greatest American ever was Cotton Mather. Okay. Who, by the time he was 14, supposedly, that's what I studied, he was proficient in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, German, French, Iroquois. Now, do you think he was playing a lot of sport? Think he had a lot of free time? No. His dad, who was president of Harvard, put him to the task. He didn't put himself to the task. Yeah, after a while he kind of did. But his dad put him to the task. This is what you need to know. Sports, as I see it, is kind of like for orphans. It's people showing they're basically orphans. I don't have a dad that's really disciplining me and making me learn that which is essential for the Christian life.
And of course, that does play into the story of Lombardi. He certainly had a dad. and he had a good dad. His dad was a meat packer, a butcher.
In New Jersey, right? Northern New Jersey?
Yes, in New Jersey, Sheepshead Bay. But the one of the crucial relationships at the core of the Green Bay Packers was between Lombardi and the prodigal son, he's referred to as Paul Hornung. And what was Paul Hornung's story? His father was alcoholic, and he didn't know his father very well because his father separated from his mother before he was born. And so Paul Hornung was fatherless, and yet he was the star of a star from Notre Dame in the 50s, and then he went on to the Packers. The Golden Boy, they called him, right? Mm-hmm. So there's your instinct here has some relevance to the Lombardi story.
Well, okay, going back.
Sorry to.
My interest in sports got way too intense, right? But because my mom didn't go to church, okay, so my mom, sports was like huge with my mom. Okay, so it
was an ersatz religion.
Sure it was. Okay. And it was for Wisconsin. So 1957, the Braves go to the World Series. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't paying attention. She was listening to it on the radio. I wasn't paying attention. But then they had the World Series with the Yankees, and I'm 5, and I'm sitting on the couch, and I know I'm on the left, and then we're watching the game. She's totally interested in the game. This is she's from Milwaukee, okay, outside of Milwaukee. So I said, Mom, why do they go that way? Why don't they go this way? Well, she was getting frustrated, okay. But the next year, if I was good, I'm totally into I couldn't wait till the next year. Okay, so now if I had to behave, but I get the radio, I wouldn't miss a game. And they went to the World Series again, 58. 59, they missed it by just a little bit. So 3 years in a row, the Packers are like intense. The Braves. The Braves right. Are intense. Okay, so totally into this. Okay. Because it is an ersatz religion. Okay, now I'm also into church. I'm not into church, but the sports is like everybody's into sports. Back then, every car radio was on. If there was a Braves Cubs game, everybody's listening to it. It was a different culture in the 50s. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it was a religion, and it does engulf you. And then when the Packers started, right before Lombardi came, I don't know when he came. Was it 59, 60?
59.
Okay.
Yeah.
When he came in 59, here's what happened. See, in 58, the Colts played the Giants in the championship game. And we're at the Delview, which was the big resort in the Dells. Mm-hmm. And my mom died later on, and my dad remarried the wife of one of the owners, okay? Because they were really close. And the owner was a bartender. Like one of the best bartenders, like right out of a movie, okay? So everybody's there. Anybody that was everybody. And you had senators, you had everybody there for this game. And I'm at the bar, because you could be at the bar back then.
Right.
And there's that black and white TV, and it's totally intense. I can't even tell the story. Every single time, I'm just going to break up. Yeah, because I was hypnotized on that. Okay, so Alan Amici, they make it down to the goal line, and then Alan Amici, who was a Badger from Wisconsin,
right.
He's like the hero.
Right, Amici. Yeah.
And then he wins. It was his. He got the touchdown.
Mm-hmm. And so
it was so intense. I literally, it's like a religious experience as far as just grabbing you. Okay, so that was for me. I'm only 6. It grabbed the whole culture, and they say that was the greatest game ever played. And from that game, football then went on the rise. And right then, Lombardi comes into the scene.
Right, as a head coach. That's right.
Because that
At
game
Green Bay.
shifted off the Braves. The Braves, their last game, they didn't make the '59 series. Okay, so they didn't get to the World Series. They missed it by a bit. So now Lombardi comes in, and within a year, I remember the Van Brocklin, the Eagle game. They didn't win. They came real close, if I remember right. And
the clock ran out.
yeah, but all of a sudden, now people are really starting to move with the Packers.
Right.
Okay.
And that's where my family history would be interesting a little bit here too. So my dad is called upon. He's a banker in Appleton, Wisconsin. He's called upon. The bishop asks my father to run the fundraising program for the local Catholic high school. They're going to build a Catholic high school in Appleton. And my dad looks around for an opening speaker for this fund drive, and he realizes that the new coach of the Green Bay Packers that nobody knows yet is a pious Catholic. So my dad calls up Vince Lombardi, and he comes to Appleton, and he gives the kickoff speech for the fundraising drive for the people to go out in Appleton and raise the capital to build the high school. That's how my dad met Vince Lombardi.
Okay, Lombardi died at what age?
57 in 1970.
Okay, so that's only 11 years away. 59 to 70. That's only 11 years.
Yeah. I mean,
that seems like a long time when you're 7 going to 18, right?
Right. And of course, that all happened before I had consciousness. I was born in 1958.
Right, but I was 7, so I was like...
You're older than I am.
Intensely into it, and then it becomes part of your family.
Right. The soul forever stands at its source, which is a line from one of John Donne's books.
Right, and then we were into football, so our junior year we were last place, and our senior year we were co-champions. So we were... that was my game, and I wasn't that big, okay, and I wasn't that fast, but we played it, and that was the game we loved. But you got to understand, baseball was not a violent game. Football, now everything shifts to football. We're looking at the corruption of the culture here. We're trying to notice, what does football do to the culture? What does this frenzy for sports, or this devotion to sports, what's its tendency, okay? And we shifted off baseball being absolutely the national sport. Boom, suddenly shifts. Football now is the national sport. And we're shifting off to a nonviolent sport to a violent sport. What's the effect?
Well, I'm not going to try to raise questions of sweeping effects before we get the stories out.
Okay, get the stories out, but we're just trying to think in the background.
Well,
what we're concerned about is the big question. What is the effect of sports? Because I always remember reading that they found all this communist material up here, St. Joe, Michigan, back in 1921 or something.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, it was a big deal. And if I remember right, some of the writing said that communism is going to destroy America by sex in sports. Okay. So Notre Dame, the Notre Dame Observer, it's all about theater, what movie's out, which is basically sex, okay. It's the theater and the brothel, and the church father says the theater is the brothel, okay. I'm just saying.
Okay.
And sports, violence, sex and violence. I'm just saying, there it is. We want to be aware of what we're talking about.
Well, yeah, but if we're talking about Vince Lombardi, we might want to take a more gentle approach to this.
He is coming in to try to be a Christian.
Well, he was.
But that's, is that like trying to be a Christian actress, which the church fathers would totally never allow? Okay. Can you be a Christian sports? Look, we could name some, but I won't for you. These are the questions that we want to have in the background.
Can we put these questions in a parentheses, and I'll give you a more positive sense of what might go on in sports that's a positive human value. Okay? There's this passage that actually Joseph Pieper underlines in his book, Leisure, the Basis of Culture. And indeed, one of my favorite professors at Notre Dame was of blessed memory, Joseph Evans, who died my senior year at Notre Dame.
I know him.
Yeah, I know. You knew him. I knew him. A lot of us knew him. But one time he was walking and he was talking to another friend of ours, someone known to both of us. And he said, see the Farleyites playing on the field. And they were playing Frisbee, or maybe passing the football.
On the
I'm
North
not sure.
Quad there.
But on the North Quad, and the Farleyites were all guys in those days. That was a guys' dorm. Well, I guess they were all guys in those days. At this point.
Well, when I went freshman year, it was no girls were allowed.
Okay, so see the Farleyites play on the field, he said.
Okay.
Thus so the Holy Spirit plays upon the world. And the passage he was talking about is here. It's wisdom personified in Proverbs chapter 8. And wisdom says, I was beside him as his craftsman. That is God. I was beside God as his craftsman. And I was his delight day by day, playing before him all the while, playing on the surface of his earth. And I found delight in the sons of men. So play represents delight and joy. The joy of the Lord is your strength. People derive joy from their experience of play well played. Okay?
Okay.
And so I would yes, there is always a problem if you have all play and no work. I mean, that would be a deformation or an imbalance.
Well, that was Aristotle. Aristotle said you need catharsis. You need some relief, and Plato kind of challenged him on that.
Well, all right.
Plato had his position, and Aristotle challenged Plato.
I got that, but the Aristotelian ideal is what? It's 3 lives of the ancient city.
True, but Aristotle is a complete pagan, right? He's not a Christian even in the
3
slightest.
lives of the ancient city are contemplation, action, which we can translate as work, okay? So there's work, there's contemplation, and there's recreation or play. And all 3 of these aspects of human life need to work together in the city, in the polis. And that is what we might defend if we're looking at the story of Vince Lombardi. Because what Lombardi embodied was the possibility that you could be excellent at your work and be a good Christian. Be an excellent Christian at the same time. You could win and be a good Christian at the same time.
Well, okay.
And in other words, the glory of God is man fully alive, like Saint Irenaeus says. So that's the and the reason I'm highlighting that is that was the debate 18 years ago between you and I. I was arguing, if I remember this correctly, and you can fill in your side of it because I want to be fair to you. But I was arguing that it was possible for a Christian to be good, to be excellent at what he did. And Lombardi embodied that ideal of being both a good Christian and an excellent coach. And he lived it. And from what we can tell, he began to suffer the demise of his historical ideal even as he lived. In that dramatic moment when he was dying, and he said, and I'm going to read this from the book because it's pretty powerful. He's dying, and he recognizes, I got to get the right page here. But this is now the 20th of August, and he dies in early September of 1970. His white blood cell count had dropped to 2,100. He was having continuous heart palpitations. He began to have periods of disorientation. One night...
What was he dying of?
Cancer. He had cancer of the colon. One night, as Marie sat nearby in the stillness of the room, he startled her by barking out a stern warning in his sleep. "Joe Namath," he shouted, "you're not bigger than football. Remember that."
He said that in his sleep?
In his sleep. He was in delirium. I mean, the sickness of delirium. But
it's like Stonewall Jackson saying, "We'll go over on the other side."
Yeah,
when he was sick.
Strike the tent. I know that story. Oh no, that's what Robert E. Lee said.
But Stonewall Jackson said, "Let's go over to the other side."
Yeah. Jackson said, "Let's go over to the other side." It's Lee, when he was dying, he said his last word.
Jackson's more spiritual because it implies going over to heaven.
Strike the tent is quite spiritual. It refers to the tent of the body that's going to come back in the resurrection.
You're right.
And since they're striking down statues of Robert E. Lee, it seems
what did Sherman and Sheridan say?
I have no idea.
Hooker.
I have no idea what those guys said, but we do know the last words of those guys, don't we?
Yeah.
Interesting that this wasn't Vince's last words, but in his sickness and in his sleep, he says, "You're not bigger than football." It says here, Lombardi respected Namath's talent. Before the opening kickoff of the 1969 Super Bowl, he had seconded the white-shoed quarterback's bold prediction that the insurgent Jets would upset the Baltimore Colts. But Namath, a relatively tame character compared to what was to follow, nonetheless might have evoked something deeply troubling to the old man. Now, remember, the literary reference to the old man is Lombardi. Lombardi is known as the old man, and just so you know that.
He's only 55.
57, but he always had a way of gravely carrying himself as if he were older than he was, in a way, I think.
Right, but there's another famous Belichick. I don't know. I can't remember. Another famous football coach, and he was on TV one time, and he said, "My mom." He might have been from New York, but he said, "My mom always was telling me, when are you going to get a real job?" Well, the mom was serious. He said, "Okay," because she knew that a football coach is not really contributing anything to a Christian culture. I mean, that's, what are you contributing? Oh, I'm a football coach. And the mother's going, well, you're doing nothing. See, that's the question.
Okay.
That's the question.
No,
are you just entertaining? What are you doing?
Well, no.
What is it?
For Lombardi, I'm pursuing excellence in my craft.
Yeah, but your craft could be actress, actor.
I'm pursuing excellence in teaching people character and teamwork. And
is that what we're seeing in Green Bay? Character developing in that city?
Well, let's not jump.
These football players exhibit a lot of good character usually. First of all, how did football start? Wasn't it? I saw a documentary in Green Bay, of Green Bay, how they were street fighters, and they were a blot on the community, and so they, to kind of like cure the community, make the community better. They said they lured these street fighters into how would you like to keep doing street fighting, but doing it in this form and getting paid for it. We got a team. Now, what's your comment on that?
Well, okay, I mean, it has humble beginnings, but it's...
In other words, you're saying football did take its beginnings from that.
To some extent, sure. We know that.
So is football a violent game? Is street fighting a violent enterprise?
Yes, of course. But for Vince Lombardi, he referred to it as controlled violence, and he believed in rules. So and he no cheap shots, no misuse of the rules to get ahead, and the dignity of your opponent, and so on. It's not entirely uncivilized for him, but there could be the inordinate attraction to the wrong side of this game. We all have a dark side, I guess.
Well, let's just say yeah. we're to honor our fathers, okay,
right.
and especially our spiritual fathers. Paul was a father, So we take the spiritual fathers of the church. You pick out the best ones, okay. It could be Augustine. It could be Chrysostom. And if you're Protestant, it could be Calvin, it could be Luther, it could be from our country, Jonathan Edwards, Cotton Mather. You put them at the table, okay? You put them at the table and you say, well, what's your guys' interest in sports? We're going to tell you all about sports. You're living now, let's say. You're just, in a time warp here. What would they say about sports? Nobody wants to know what they would say. We know that. University of Notre Dame is not going to major in I wonder what the church fathers would say about our football stadium here and how we have all the classes, all centered around it. Literally, right?
Yeah, that's a new development.
Well, I'm just saying, what would they say? Nobody's really interested in that. Just like if you try to say to all the Congress, can you reinvestigate 9/11? We just want to take a better look at that. They're not interested in that. Okay,
well, you're going pretty far afield.
Well, I'm just saying, why aren't people interested in really putting the Word of God and the church fathers on our sports?
Well, I would suggest that Vince would probably be interested.
Vince would be interested because
he had a drive toward excellence. He wanted to.
Yeah, he'd be interested in my question.
Well, he sure would be, I think.
And then he may have to
daily communicant. He
may have to resign. He may go, Peter, I think you're right. I'm quitting. Well, I'm just...
It didn't get to happen that way, Peter.
Well, he did quit, and he shouldn't have died that young.
Well...
So was he stressed out?
He had that... Well, I mean, far be it for me to criticize the dead. I'm trying to look at his virtues.
Well, he wasn't doing as good at the last year, and then he went to the Redskins.
Well, no, he quit as coach at the top of his game. He had just won that famous Ice Bowl and the second.
That was in '67.
Correct, and in '68 he won the second Super Bowl, and then he moved to just being the general manager. He retired from coaching.
Yeah,
and then he couldn't stand it, not being a coach, and so he took the job at Washington Redskins after that.
Okay. Now we were pointing out that the difference between now and then is that Lombardi in '66, '67, people were still holding on to their Christianity as far as we could see in Wisconsin. Okay.
They were, and they used the experience of football to underscore their duties to God and to other people.
Yeah, you could argue that it was still enhancing your Christianity, because Paul would look at the races, and he says, now look at these races, look at these quasi-Olympic games, quasi-Olympic games, and he said we can learn from that, because Christianity, they're getting an earthly prize crown, and we're trying to get a heavenly crown. And I think it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, I think that's where you want to go. Know you not that they which run in a race run all, but one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain. And every man that strives for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. I therefore so run, not as uncertainly, so fight I, not as one that beats the air, but I keep under my body and I bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway.
There you go.
Okay, so he is drawing strength from that. And in Wisconsin, you could argue, during the Lombardi era, the players were only, look at the money, okay? Jerry Cramer wrote the famous book, Run to Daylight, right?
No, Instant Replay.
Instant Replay.
Run to Daylight was a journalist that helped Vince write that.
That book, okay. So it was Instant Replay, yeah, right. So Jerry Cramer was a hero on the Packers. Everybody liked Jerry Cramer. He was a guard. He created the sweeps for Horning and Taylor. Mm-hmm. Okay, but he was in the championship game and the Pro Bowl, and I think he only made $40,000 or $50,000 that year. Mm-hmm. Okay, now if somebody is in the Pro Bowl and they're the Super Bowl champion, are they going to make more than $50,000? I mean, of course, you go with inflation, and you compensate for that.
Inflation, it's way disproportional.
They're going to get how much times more? 50 times more?
I don't know exactly, but
25, 50, 100 times more, whatever it is. There's a lot more. And look at the money. That's called corruption. Okay, because the Packers then didn't make enough money. They had to get a job off season. So that's why they would come to our town. They would come to the high school. And play basketball.
We had Packers working in Appleton. They ran a restaurant.
Yes.
Fuzzy Thurston and Max McGee, the left guard. It was a restaurant.
Yes.
I mean,
right. So the point is, football was being used by the Christian culture to reflect on their Christianity. Now it's shifted. It's gone to a continental divide. It's gone the other way. Now it's draining Christianity out of the culture.
You think so, huh?
Sure it is.
Run to win.
Sure it is.
Well,
because the children, when they're brought up, it's not how it was when we were brought up. Okay. So in other words, our heroes were.
I think you should beware of the arrogance of age, Peter.
Okay, I'm just saying, our you got to be skeptical now. Baseball heroes, okay. For me, Hank Aaron, Eddie Matthews, okay. Football, Johnny Unitas was by far the greatest. Nobody doubted that. But the Packers, you had Bart Starr. Bart Starr was not that good. He was the 17th round draft choice, and he was low key. Unitas was more flamboyant, and they kept a good image. Whitey Ford for the Yankees, they weren't allowed to smoke on the advertisements. I mean, they made so that when we look to these guys, they had a clean image. They don't have that.
Okay.
We're looking at the corruption that sports in and of itself tends, by the nature of it, tends to end up in those spectacles category that Tertullian said Christians can't participate in.
Okay, any good thing can be corrupted, and the corruption of a more excellent thing is a more excellent corruption. You know that principle?
Yeah,
but to argue from the corruption against the virtue of Lombardi isn't fair. That would be that's my comeback here.
Just because he went to Mass every morning, people that go to Mass every morning, but their Christian life is not so Christian. Everybody.
Well, that's a judgment. I mean, maybe their Christian life would be worse if they didn't go to Mass every morning.
Yeah. I'm just saying it's good that you're.
In other words, this whole process of assessing the Christian life is dependent on the mercy of God. So I don't want to. But for Lombardi, we might apply the idea here that you could have your heart's desire on something that's not really your heart's the depth of your heart's desire to start with, and then as you grow, you set aside that thing you were desiring for God, and that's what happens.
Well, normally
on all these things. In other words, you learn something from the game, but it's incomplete apart from God.
Here's the controlling verse. And every man that strives for the mastery is temperate in all things. So my position is, alcohol. Yeah, if you want to have a glass of wine or a glass of beer, I think that's perfectly fine. Okay, now there's Christian groups in the past, or even now,
They'd say no to any of it. Yeah.
any of it. But see, that is denying the idea of temperance. Okay, and so what I want to say, you can't watch. Well, I mean, I'm going to be honest. Okay, you can replay those games. So Aaron Rodgers beat San Francisco at the last second. Okay,
Right.
Well, you can watch the last 5 minutes, and you can see all the exciting. It was the last 5 minutes. So I did do that. Okay. I did.
Okay.
Okay. But
I mean,
you could argue, well, that was a waste of God's time. But yeah, I did. I mean, part of it was just the pure pleasure I wanted to see it. However, I do keep this in mind that I'm learning discipline. In other words, they're doing this. This was tremendous discipline at the end here. And so you can incorporate concept of discipline if you do it right.
Right.
That enhances your life. But what's happening is it's not enhancing people's Christianity, it's tearing it down. And that's what alcohol will do if you drink too much of it. And if you get drunk on this stuff.
Well, yeah, the misuse of anything in God's creation.
Well, how about parents that follow their kids around all day, taking them to hockey games and I mean, like it's a super religion. I mean, with any of the church fathers, any of the people I mentioned, Cotton Mather all the way down, Jonathan Edwards, would they approve of this? No, they wouldn't.
Well, no, Peter, it's just another form of socialization. I mean, so the child is good at a certain sport, and you let them do that sport.
It's a false god. It's idolatrous. That's the tendency of it. And you're misleading the kids because they become super. They're great athletes in high school, and they think there's something. And then they have a crash. Of course, they're going to have a crash because it was all an illusion.
Well, no, I have a story to tell about that, just to defend the virtue of sports. My friend, he called me his favorite religion teacher, because I only taught 1 year in high school religion. I taught with the legendary Father Bly in the same religion department or theology department as Father Bly from St. Joe High School. And of course, they named the football field at St. Joe High School after him, and he's still living. I think he's close to 90.
Got the bad feet, right? I thought he walked.
Yeah, he shuffled.
Yeah.
Especially as he got older. Anyway, this student was really good at hockey, and I would go watch the hockey games, and I enjoyed that a lot. And that would have been like his sophomore year. His senior year, he was involved in a terrible hockey accident, and he was paralyzed from the waist down.
I mean, you got while playing hockey.
While playing hockey. And I visited him at the rehab hospital many times because I was his favorite religion teacher. And I always said to people, if your favorite religion teacher doesn't stick by you when you're suffering like that, who would? I was just following the trajectory of my pastoral work, even though I wasn't teaching high school anymore. And what I remember is when I first heard about his injury, I was sitting in my office at Queen of Peace Parish, where I was the coordinator of religious ed at that time, or director of religious ed, whatever. And the man whose son was ended up being, I think he was either professional or in college hockey. He was also a hockey coach at Notre Dame. He called me and he said, this student will probably never walk again. And I'm listening to this, and then he closed the phone conversation by saying, "It's still a great game." I hung up that phone. I slammed it down. I was so angry. A great game? And this kid's going to be paralyzed for the rest of his life? And it's a great game? And then I go to visit this guy in the hospital. And what do you think he was watching on TV from his Straker bed?
Hockey.
He's watching a hockey game. He hadn't given up on the game just because of the injury. And that's the problem I have with your theological position. You want to give up the game just because of the injury. I'd say, no way.
No. I mean, I was out visiting my friend who was one of the better athletes in our class. I grew up with him. And he's one of the fellows that played baseball and football all the time.
Okay.
And we were talking about how we just never got injured, never thought of getting injured, and we never expected anybody to get injured.
Okay.
And we're playing, talking about football, baseball, how are you going to get injured, okay? But we're going all at it, and when you're young like that, and you grew up in the game, you're not thinking of getting injured, and
Right.
you rarely do get injured.
Right.
Because you're so used to playing the game properly, you're not trying to get injured.
Right.
Okay. Now, if they coach you wrong and you do it mechanically and you do it because somebody told you this is how you're supposed to do it, well, there could be problems because now you're going to be second guessing.
Okay. Well, years later, this same person, well, he died after an operation that he was having to help him with some of his problems that occurred because he was paralyzed. I think he was about 39 years old or something like that when he died. And I went to the funeral visitation, and to greet the family members and to weep and all that. And it was amazing because got to the end of the funeral visitation, and guess who I saw? The same guy that had told me the news that the kid was injured. Now he's much older. And I greeted him, and I said, it's really good to see you. And I remember him saying that. It's still a great game. In other words, it was a denouement. It came right full circle.
Yeah.
Right from the moment with the phone to the moment in the funeral home. And yeah, I just the greatness of humanity when we craft games can still shine through. The problem you're saying is that greatness is now occluded and darkened because it's separated from God. Now, I got that. That happened.
Education, public schools were never set up to include sports. Okay, so when my grandfather, his yearbook has a couple pages in it. It was a small school, and they had debate. They didn't have sports. Okay, so sports is an addendum. Okay, and I'm sure they added it because people are so bored by school, but it's not supposed to be part of the real purpose of why the government says you need to be educated. Okay, they can't say, well, you need to be into sports. Well, the only thing people remember from high school is the sports. They don't remember a class. Oh, and then they say, well, what was your favorite teacher? Well, people roll their eyes because what do you mean favorite teacher for what? Like they're gonna like change your life, like really? No. Sports is what they remember, and that's not supposed to be part of it. Okay? That's not the reason that the government says you got to be educated. It wasn't because you got to be part of a sport. But they made that the meaning now. So the whole thing is.
Well, yeah, no, and what does Jacques Maritain say is that you can't hold something together according to a principle of matter. People are held together by knowledge and love, and knowledge and love is ultimately should lead us toward God's knowledge of us and God's love for us and our knowledge of God. That's true. And so if they make the material matter of sports the thing that they're going to try to hold together, that's going to be disaster. I agree with that.
Well, isn't that what's happening? I mean, we're right here at Notre Dame.
I mean, I think we should just let the principles speak for themselves here.
Okay. Well, the principle is that this thing, which is an addendum, which is not part of it originally, now conquers the host.
Yeah, but in order to remedy the problem, we have to remember the virtue of the founders. See, that's why Lombardi's memory is still important.
But it's
interesting to me.
But you did admit there's an element of ersatz religion.
For some people.
Yeah. How many? Quite a few. How many people overdrink?
Lots.
Okay.
Okay. Like when I experienced a football game at Notre Dame, and we ran into a person who was clowning in a lewd way, and I wrote a letter to the Observer, right? And I said, what did the key line was, cheer, but don't get frenzied.
Yeah, well, that's what
cheer, but don't get frenzied. Drink, but don't get drunk. Clown, but don't be lewd. Let us not lose heaven over earthly festivals. That's what I said, and I got mocked in the Observer after that. They made tremendous fun of my letter, and they made sport of me. Mm-hmm. But the issue was that I still stand by that it's possible to enjoy a game without going overboard. And it's possible to enjoy a culture without the culture being an idol. Right, that's the difference.
But we don't have, our culture has no leaders, and I'm talking about spiritual leaders. There's no wise men. We don't have Robert Louis Dabney's of the 1900s. We don't have Orestes Bronson's. We don't have the John Calhouns. We have people that couldn't even come close to what they were, and yet we have more advantages to get there. Okay, so what is tearing us down? Here's a scripture. Dead flies cause the ointment of the apothecary, the pharmacist, to send forth a stinking savor. So does a little folly him that is in reputation for wisdom and honor. Okay, am I not in sport? Okay, so does a little folly him that is in reputation for wisdom and honor. So we don't have men that are in reputation for wisdom and honor anymore. Okay, they're gone. And
but
I'm just saying.
How do we get to that unless we remember the cultural exemplars that God gave us?
Because it says here, if you're participating in it's just a little folly, and it destroys your reputation for wisdom and honor. Yeah, see, when you're giving yourself over, these things are questionable. A Christian could not be seen going in the theater. Tertullian said, a Christian, no way would a Christian,
of course, because
he would lose all reputation for honor and wisdom if he went to these things.
The theater at the time of Tertullian was connected to the worship of the false gods.
Oh, ours aren't?
Well, not in the direct way.
How about the immorality? He was against that. He said the immorality should keep you out.
I got that. Yeah, like the peasant of Notre Dame said, existence hangs by a thread because of fornication. I got that. Okay.
And theater is fundamentally
I got that.
Layers of fornication, subliminal.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't have a Jimmy Stewart or a good person. There might be few, but there are some.
It's going to be acted by a person who the next piece that he does, he's an all-out fornicator. So you're still watching somebody they're all involved in it. They're associated with it.
Okay.
That's the trade.
Okay. Well, we're jumping away from Lombardi.
Well, we're talking about 18 years later, and that this thing has put us on a trajectory where we've lost wisdom. Where are the men of wisdom and the men of honor? Because you don't have honor when you go to these spectacles. And even at Notre Dame, when you were, did John Donne go to those games?
No, he didn't.
Yeah, I wonder why.
Well,
no, wasn't he a man of wisdom and honor?
Yes, he was.
Yeah, he didn't feel like going, did he?
No, we didn't feel like going.
Yeah, I wonder if there was a connection.
Oh,
I'm just saying.
you're hitting below the belt here.
If we don't
Peter.
critique this stuff,
I think.
nobody wants to critique it because they're making so much money. That's the real reason. They don't want to, I mean, come on, they're making tons of money, so they don't want to critique it.
Okay, I want to critique it, but I also want to uphold the virtue of the virtuous men who got into the struggle and won, like Vince Lombardi.
Okay, so he was coaching a bunch of street fighters because street fighters are a blot on the community, and if you can get them off the street and into something that's it's like going off of heroin onto what do they take? Morphine,
Methadone.
Methadone.
Isn't that the treatment?
Yeah. So that's what football is, right? And then the spectators, they just love to see a street fight, and then they get to say, well, it's kind of like it, and they're all excited. I'm just saying.
Well, that's a very harsh reduction.
You have to be ready that it could go there. If you don't have a good defense, they could overwhelm you. If you're not prepared, that Tertullian and the church fathers would agree with me or take my position. Yeah, because they rule. Their position rules ours. We have no authority to say they're wrong. And if they put thumbs down, like the Caesars, they put some thumbs down, okay? And if Tertullian and the church fathers say, I'm sorry, Gus, thumbs down for your Vince.
Well, I think the court's still out.
Okay, we got 2 minutes.
Well, yeah, there's more that could be said, but I think we've summarized the state of the discussion as of 2021. I think pay attention to that last quote from Proverbs, I think.
Well, the danger is that we fall in love with these people. You fall in love with these celebrities and these guys, and you're not falling in love with a really virtuous person, and that's dangerous because you end up admiring some of these guys, some of these actors and actresses. A lot of these football players end up marrying actors and actresses. They're almost the same. They're celebrities. And usually they're very sinful, usually, with some rare exception. Then you end up admiring a sinful person instead of Christ and the saints and godly people in the community. That's a huge problem. You're getting the young people to admire the wrong person.
Yeah, but I still think.
And maybe Lombardi,
he was admirable. God, family, Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, back then. Yeah. I'm not, but I'm saying here's the tendency. Where are we at now, 18 years later?
We have to remember virtue and the virtues of Vince. Come to the Paper Valley Hotel on November 16th in Appleton and join me for the 100th anniversary of my dad's birth. And I'll treat you to a drink at the Vince Lombardi Steakhouse, which was established by his son and has all the Vince Lombardi memorabilia there at the Paper Valley Hotel.
In Appleton.
In Appleton. November 16th this year.
Okay, so this is Gus Zuehlke, Peter Helland, trying to revisit the show we did 18 years ago and add some reflections on it. So till next time with Gus, Citizens for Community Media.